question. Good afternoon to you, John. Just get John unmuted now, and we'll be ready.
There I am.
There you go, John. How are you today, John?
I'm excellent. Thank you. It's a beautiful day here in Middle Tennessee.
It looks lovely out that window, John. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. So I'm going to disappear off of here, John. I'm going to leave you the whole screen to yourself. So,
all right,
John, tell us what got you into wood turning.
Well, what got me into wood turning was, I don't know, 40 years ago or so, I worked in the computer business, bank equipment, ATMs and that sort of thing. And I got interested in furniture building. And I thought someday I would like to, build furniture full time. And I worked at it pretty hard. I really didn't enjoy the work I was doing with the, bank equipment anymore. I didn't like the people and the situations. Usually when I got involved, I was a technical specialist, and everybody was mad by the time I got called. And that was not much fun. It wasn't the work itself, but the conditions I wasn't crazy about. So anyway, I built furniture, made a lot of different things, and I was sort of aware of the wood turners. There weren't that many, people turning at the time. There was no AAW yet, but I sort of knew what people were doing from, fine woodworking in the magazines and stuff like that. So I had a little lathe and that I used to make, knobs and buttons and things one might need for furniture. But I certainly wasn't a turner. But anyway, I got started one day, and Liam O'Neill came to Appalachian Center for Craft, which is near John Lucas and myself. John actually worked for the university that runs the craft center. And anyway, so I met Liam there. I had already started turning a little bit, and so I got pretty pumped up there. And one thing led to another. I was good at it. I didn't really struggle much with the turning. When I started, it all made sense to me, and so one thing led to another. And the first AAW symposium came along, and so I went to that, and so I knew everybody pretty early. I had met everybody, so I kind of jumped in full tilt, and I had applied for my first ever craft show, and the company I was working for, I was trying to wait until I was vested in that company, so I had a little, some benefits for when I got older, like now, and but it was hard to work up the courage to actually quit, but they had they rearranged the company a bit, and they laid me off and paid me for several months. So I did that craft show, made a little money, and we've never looked back. So I put 2 kids through college doing this.
Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah. So, John, you mentioned Liam O'Neill, who was from Ireland. For people that don't know Liam, so was he your first tutor at the start, or did you get other tutors?
Yeah, I'm not sure I would even call him a tutor. We just went to a little demonstration, but I met him and visited with him quite a bit. Then I've visited his home, and we've been together quite a bit over the years now. But like I said, he was certainly an inspiration, and gave me opened my eyes to possibilities, and he was a very good teacher. Taught me things that I still use today, just from a short demo. There were some pretty clever things that he taught me.
Yeah. So, John, you're well known for hollow forms, but what were the first pieces that you started to turn? Or did you jump head first straight into hollow forms?
Well, it was certainly not long after I started turning. I turned several kinds of little bowls at first, and but again, I was aware of there weren't that many people hollow turning, but of course Dave Ellsworth and and Bill Hunter and a guy named Dan Kavitka, who most of you probably wouldn't know. But you know, it was sort of like, well, if they can do that, I can do that. You know, because I'd realized that turning, like I said, to me was not particularly difficult at what I had done so far. So I did some small hollow pieces, and they worked pretty well. Made some tools. You know,
So do you
and
think?
I got the Stewart tools. I've started with the Stewart tools, and it
So
all made sense. I like the idea. I like the hollow pieces because early on I like the textures, and I like doing, you know, little decorative bits of texture or this or that, and the hollow forms were a really nice way to do that.
So do you think, John, maybe the furniture making was a great bonus to understanding how to cut the wood then, if you were handling the wood turning so well at the start?
Say that again,
The,
please.
the furniture making at the start, that must have been a huge bonus to you then to understand how to cut the wood and the wood turning.
Oh well, yeah, and I think it's like most things in life, Pat. There, you know, people are sometimes just things suit them. You know, you can be a natural musician, or you can be a natural mathematician, or you know, it's not that you have to be to do that. You know, people there are a lot of good wood turners. It probably doesn't come quite as natural to them as you know. There are a lot of good musicians that are not natural musicians, but they work hard at it. Like I said, I was just fortunate that the turning really just always clicked and made sense to me. And so the hollow forms weren't particularly difficult. And you know, early on, being able to do things like that, I've always you know, figured that I can do anything that I want to do, and so I don't get too bound up in lots of technical stuff, because I know if I need to do something, I can ask, and you know, somebody or work it out. So
I don't think there's too much you wouldn't be able to do now, John, at this point in wood turning. So did you find there was a need to have to make your own tools, John? You're well known for the tools and equipment that you make and supply. So was there, because of lack of tools in the market, basically, you felt the need to make your own?
well, that's exactly right. I was talking about tools. Look here, this is for the raffle.
Excellent.
So the reason is, as I said, I started out a man named Dennis Stewart. Some of you know the Stewart name at least, but Dennis made some hook tools that had little carbide saw teeth brazed onto the end, and then that was sharpened up. And of course, they worked well on hardwoods, on softwoods. That little flat carbide doesn't cut that well. But the nice thing about them were they were really nicely shaped and let you get right in a small hole. They were just perfect. And he got a little success, and so he made the smart move to move away from that little tool that worked really well, and made these hook tools with the wheel on the end, and the swivel and all that stuff. And they were just pretty crappy, I thought. So when I would teach, I taught right from the beginning. I taught classes, and we never really had what students needed. And so, you know, we ended up modifying things or trying to make things. And Dennis was not interested in making the tools that I thought worked well. And so I kind of ended up doing it myself. And he had quit. I probably wouldn't have done it, but he was basically out of the business. He got into a deal with Sorby, and I don't know, some of that all went sideways, and I don't know what all the deals were, but he kind of faded away. And so I started making a similar tool to his first little carbide tip tool, except that I use high-speed steel cutters that come out and are easily sharpened. You know.
Yes, indeed, and highly sought after as well. So what's your go-to tool then, John, when you go to the workshop?
I use my number one, I use the 3/4 inch hollowing tools, and I rarely use the small ones, but I do occasionally. And the only reason I usually use the smaller one, like we're going to raffle off today, is if I want to do a piece with a considerably smaller hole. But you can do small pieces with my full size tools, and using the same tool all the time. It's like an extension of my hand. It's always that old cutter's always out there at the same place, and so I think consistency in turning in general is good for you. And so if you always use the same tool, same gouge, the same this, the same that, I think that's a big help.
So somebody getting into hollow forms, John, you would recommend then the slightly larger tool then because they're so versatile.
Yeah, well, if people have small lathes and they really are going to work on smallish pieces, say 5-6 inch pieces like that, the small tools are perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people that do large pieces with small tools. It takes a lot of skill and a lot of patience to do that. And there are people that do things that I could not do with the smaller tools. I've made people some custom tools that are quite long and quite small, in diameter, and they do some pretty amazing things with them. But that's difficult. But yeah, the small tools are fine. Financially, we won't get into it, but obviously the large ones cost more.
Yeah.
So if you want to get started and you're really going to stick with the smaller pieces, then start with a small tool. If you think really, if your ultimate goal is to make more normal scale pieces, then rather than buying 2 sets, go ahead and start with a large one.
Well, as we've discovered here, John, with many of our guests, one tool of any type is never enough. So
yes, I know. Well, I'm not the best tool salesman for that reason. I like people to spend your money on something that they'll use, and
Well, quality sells itself, John. So
I'm a minimalist when it comes to tools. I'm not the typical wood turner. I don't think you need very much.
So, John, had you any eureka moments in your workshop when you started out in the wood turning?
Well, wasn't much of a wood shop at the time. I actually started turning out on my porch not far from where I'm sitting here now. I had the little lathe dragged out on the porch. It was an ancient Delta lathe. But probably the closest thing to a eureka moment is I turned, I don't know, maybe half a dozen bowls or something. And of course, I'd heard that you're supposed to rough the bowls out and dry them and then return them so you have a nice round bowl. And I was turning a little 5 or 6 inch ash bowl, just a simple bowl. And I looked at it and I thought, well, why in the hell do I want to dry this thing? It looks like a bowl now. I'm just going to sand it. So I sanded it and nothing terrible happened. I had a pretty little ash bowl, and that was that. I've never turned my wood since. And I didn't really realize much about, greenwood at the time. And David was probably the only guy really turned greenwood. And so, immediately I understood, where I was going with this, and greenwood was the ticket. And so I've been kind of a wood guy ever since. And that's one of my favorite things to talk about and teach is the use of wood, good wood, how to pick it, how to use it. Yeah.
So talking about teaching, John, you've taught hundreds, if not thousands of people at this point. So what advice do you generally have for beginners?
Well, if you're truly a beginner, and I've proven this with a few people who were sincere enough to really try it. But if you want to learn to turn, I think that the best way to become proficient quickly is to rough turn, a green log and one gouge and rough turn bowls. Do 100, do 200. I guarantee you'll be a much better turner by the time you've done those, and you're not trying to finish anything. People hate to practice and not have anything at the end, and so by doing that, you have something you can actually use. There's no pressure. You rough turn the bowl, and you don't have to get it right. You don't have to fuss with it. If you have had trouble in one spot, well, just on the next one, try to address that, and you just keep going without any pressure, and it can really make a huge difference. And once you've learned that bowl gouge, like I said, by the time you've done 100 bowls, you're going to be pretty good with the gouge, and at that point you can do just about anything you want. Once you learn how that bowl gouge works, you can use a spindle gouge, and you can use a skew, and all of those skills translate into almost any kind of turning. The problem is, a lot of us see all this stuff, you get kind of overwhelmed. And so today you want to do this, and tomorrow you want to do that, and the next day you want to do this. And you never really get, and I understand that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But by the same token, you don't always, start getting the skills that you really need because you're jumping around so much.
Yeah.
That would be my best advice.
Okay, so again, the key word, John, is practice, basically.
Well, yeah, and exactly. Practice, like I said, practicing on rough turn bowls, I think, is a great way. But pick something and kind of stick with it. How about that?
Yeah. Good advice, John. John, you do a lot of embellishment and texture on your work. So was it a conscious decision moving from the traditional round and brown into the artwork?
Yeah, again, very, very early on, Pat. Probably in the first year, or maybe the second year, AAW symposium was in Seattle, and a few of you would know a man named Wally Dickerman, who passed away just a few years ago. He was in his 90s, great turner, and he did just little bands around. He did some hollow forms, and he did just little bands of turned, just some grooves and things like that. Nothing elaborate, but that really appealed to me, that he used, some turn texture in just a small area. And I don't remember exactly, but I started out trying to do random textures on the outside of a piece, and random is kind of difficult for me. So those random ones became symmetrical radial flutes around the outside of openings and stuff. But yeah, but I've always, once I got started, I doubt that I made very many just perfectly smooth pieces. Everything's got a little, even if it's only the lip has a little decoration, I do a little something.
Yeah, we're going to see some wonderful pieces later on in a slideshow that John has sent over as well, folks. So you're in for a treat, and I know most people are aware of John's work anyway.
I have a couple with me here too.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, we can have a look at those later on, John, if that's okay.
Yep.
So, John, have you people that have inspired you over the years?
Oh, many people. Again, I never took classes or anything, but I, as I said, I knew everyone pretty early on, and I truly felt like that I did know just about everybody for a long time, but probably one of my just favorite wood turners was Al Sturr, who does some. He's a wonderful bowl turner, and he does some. Always has done very subtle textures on the outside of a bowl. You might not even see some of the textures he did. They're so light and fine and subtle. So I love the quality of his work. I always wanted to not make things like he did, but I wanted things to have that the quality, the feeling that his subtle textures and stuff did. So I like that a lot. But some of my best friends, there's a group of Stoney Lamar and Robin Horn and Michael Peterson, who is got the Pop Award this year. Some of you that got your AAW journal have seen that. And we're all good friends, and they've inspired me tremendously. And, not directly, clearly our work is all very, very different. But everything that I do probably is affected by what those folks do to one degree or another. And seeing the work that they do, this is pretty exciting, and it's hard for beginners to understand, or people that are pretty new at it. We used to talk about this, well, when I was relatively new, that you need, after people have a decade of working or 2 decades of working or something, how you can see all those years of experience in their work. And it's not that you don't do good work in a year or two. A lot of people, there are a lot of new turners who do fantastic work, but there's a quality that people get from the thousands and thousands of pieces that they've made that you can see in every piece they make, if that makes sense.
It does, John, because there, as you know, John, there's very little unique in wood turning now, and people like yourself and Stoney and Al, all those people that have inspired so many of us to try emulate that kind of work. They just really create some fantastic pieces, haven't they?
Yeah, well, a good example, to take it away from my wood friends for a minute, was I went to a pottery show some years ago. There's an American potter named Warren McKenzie who does basically functional work. He's a kind of a hero amongst potters. But this show was just simple little bowls and little teacups and like that. And you could see, looking at one of his little cups, you could see in that little cup the probably hundreds of thousands of pieces that he had thrown. You could see those, the fingerprints or the marks of all of those pieces he had made before in every little bowl that he had there. It was just remarkable.
Yeah, David Ellsworth spoke very highly of that gentleman as well. I think we have a couple of questions for you there, John. Helen, is there a couple of questions there?
We've got a comment first. Wakina said, John Jordan's 3/4 hollowing tool has improved my Lyle Jameson hollowing system as it's more versatile for hollowing now.
Oh, bless you.
Ben has asked, why do you prefer high-speed steel scrapers to the carbides for hollowing?
Well, if you use the flat top carbides, they're just not sharp enough. They may work well on denser woods. They'll probably do pretty well for you. But you need that little burr edge. My cutters are just little tiny scrapers, and they're using a burr edge just like your big bowl scraper. So they're easy to sharpen, and they're inexpensive. If you're talking about the little cup carbides like Mike Hunter makes, those are exceptionally good little tools, but they're really little gouges, and if you put them through a small opening like I work through, you can only cut in one direction because those have to be tilted. They're like little gouges, and if you go the wrong way with it, you'll get a big catch. And so mine are pretty easy to use. The carbides are a little trickier if you use the cutting carbides like the Hunters.
That's great, thank you. There's no more questions.
Thanks, Helen.
And I would just add that Mike Hunter does make carbide, the little cup cutters for my tools. And so if you're of a mind to do that, he has those available for my tools.
Yeah, and Helen will pop in the link to John's website there for all the tools and equipment, folks. There's a huge amount of things there for you to choose from. Kids in a sweet shop comes to mind when you look at John's website. So,
if I could say, there are a lot of articles and resource lists and stuff on the website.
Yep, great information there. Thank you, John. So we do encourage you to have a look, folks. So John, do you ever have a blank canvas moment when you go to the workshop? Have you ever gone out and said, what am I going to do? I can't think of anything.
Not much.
Okay.
No, well, I mean, but I may not have a specific thing, but I've either got a pile of nice wood, and it doesn't take long to start, to get sort of inspired. But very often I have specific things I want to do, and I've been working on a few pieces for AAW, and so I've kind of had some specific things in mind. I do make a lot of when I get busy, and I don't turn all the time. People probably imagine I'm just down there turning all day every day, but I really don't. And I tend to turn when I get sort of I need a little momentum, and so the momentum's hard to build sometimes. But when I get going, I tend to turn a fair amount, and what I'll do is I'll turn a lot of forms, and I may not know what I want to, how I'm going to carve or texture the piece. So I sort of make blank canvases, as you will.
Yeah.
I have a lot more turned pieces than that I haven't carved yet.
Right. So you have plenty to be working on, John. So
Say
John,
that again.
I said you have plenty to be working on.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So John, as the years progressed, you developed your own tools. So did your approach to wood turning change with developing your tools and one thing and another?
No. The what I didn't say before is like I said, I like the Stewart tool that had a little carbide tip, saw tip welded on the end, but it didn't cut very well. So what I didn't say was a friend of mine actually made us a couple of hook tools that were shaped like the Stewart and made a little high-speed steel insert for them. So that's where my tools came from. Was a friend of mine and I, like I said, made a couple, so we had tools to use. And my tools today are basically a direct copy of those. So I've been using the same thing, most of my career. They may look nicer, The tools I make now are fairly, slick looking, but it's the same tool as the one we banged out and beat on to shape up in the first place. I still have those. In fact, I used them for a lot of years, and it dawned on me one day that I probably ought to be using exactly what I'm selling rather than that old beat up one. Functionally they were the same. But.
Yeah. Okay, John. So did you see yourself as a full-time artist when you started wood turning?
Well, yeah. Again, I'd entered a craft show or had been accepted into a craft show, and so when I got laid off, like I said, I'd intended to be a furniture maker once upon a time, but then the turning kind of, consumed everything once I got started with that. So yeah, I intended to try to make a living early on, and it was a slim living, but we did.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Any other questions coming in there, Helen?
Yeah, I've got a question here from David. He says, how do you form the curves in your tools? Brute force or heated to bend?
Well, brute force is kind of a mean way to put it. But they are cold bent, David. If you saw it, you'd see it's not really brute force. They're pressed in a die with an air and hydraulic press, and it's very, very smooth operation. Just I mill the taper and then put it in the die and hold the button down, and it bends it nicely.
Yeah, we have some good photographs for later on there of John's tools together. Yeah, they're all very symmetrical. Yeah.
I would add to David that if I were to make a custom tool, I may well heat it and bend it because I don't have a die for it, and I can't I don't know. I don't have any way to bend those other than heat, probably. So, yeah.
Okay, so it's a very good point there, folks. If there is a custom tool, John is the man to make it for you. If you can't get it off the shelf or from a supplier, get it custom
There
made.
you go.
Okay,
There
Helen,
you go.
any more questions, Helen?
Yeah. Yes, there is. Gary has asked, have you any thoughts on the hooded style cutters like Woodcut and Rolly Monroe?
Well, I do, and they're nice. They're very nice tools, and I've had Raleighs here for a long time, and I forget which one, maybe the Woodcut. They're tricky tools to use for the average turner because they're difficult to maintain. They're tricky to sharpen. They're tricky to keep the little shield adjusted properly. And I think it's probably, and I apologize, I don't mean to offend, but I would say a lot of those things are in a drawer plugged up with shavings. A lot of people struggle with them. Now, they're very nice tools. Like I said, they do work very well. And when you try one, if you've got one that's properly set up and you just slam it into the wood and it doesn't catch and it just makes big shavings, and they're a delight to use. My main objection is they won't fit in the small openings that I do very well. They're not quite as slim and scaled down as they need to be to get just inside the opening. And if I use them inside, it's also hard to get the shavings out. If it's working well, you've got a big wad of shavings that are really, really difficult to get out of these small holes. So Phil Irons is the guy to talk to about those. Phil uses them very well. And I tell people about when you talk about Raleighs, if you ever watch him turn, he's got a box with about 300 little custom cutters that he carries with him. So he's got a little cutter for every situation and acute knowledge of how that thing works. So it's pretty impressive when he does it. My tools are a little simpler just to basically use, stick in there. The monkey, can use my tools.
Okay, another question there, Helen?
Yes, Glenn has asked, on your hollowing tools, are the tips soldered in or held with a set screw?
Oh no, they're held with a set screw. I don't know if we can get hard to get the light right there. You can about see it there. There's the set screw right there.
If you put your hand behind it, John, it'll help for the camera to see it. There you go. Yes, we can see that there.
Yep, and you just take it out and it's easily sharpened. I have a little sharpening jig. I've tried to make myself, I've always freehand sharpened, even though I make the cutters and things and have little jigs. When I turn, I still out of habit just freehand sharpen. And recently I've actually forced myself to do it a different way, and I use the jig and I sharpen up 5 or 10 at a time. And I use the jig and I have 5 or 10 available to me right there at my hand, so I don't have to go sharpen while I'm working.
Okay, so again, for beginners then, John, if there's a jig to sharpen these, it makes it kind of foolproof in that regard, because usually sharpening is people's biggest Achilles heel, isn't it?
Yeah. And the little jig works just like the bowl gouge jigs that many of you have. The one-way jig, the wood cut has one. I don't know, several of them. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It works just like the bowl gouge jigs. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, John. Very informative. So, John, do you recommend avenues for people to explore for promoting their work? Can you give any advice on that?
I'm sorry, your Irish accent got me that time.
Okay, John.
You'll have to say it again, friend.
You're okay. Can you recommend avenues for people to explore to promote their work?
Ah, boy, that's a good question. Things are very different now than when I started, and I honestly do, not a great job these days. I would be starving probably if I started today. But what I did, the way I contacted galleries and things like that was I did craft shows, and uh, at the craft shows that I did, you would meet gallery people. They'd come along and say, "Well, would you like to have some stuff in my gallery?" I said, "Yes, sure." And as the level of the craft shows I did got better, the quality of the galleries became better, and so it just kind of fed itself. I never really beat the bushes uh, for galleries and places to show my work. And of course, people found my work to be, people tended to like what I did. So, I got a tiny bit of recognition, I guess you would say. And so the wood galleries, were all sort of eager to have my work at the time. And so it kind of worked that way. If I were starting now, you've got to have an online presence. And I do through Instagram, and my motivation for Instagram was not necessarily to sell pieces, but I do sell a few through Instagram. But I don't have a real online sales presence for my work. For the tools, yes, but for my work, I don't. And the gallery system that I was familiar with and that helped me so much in my career is pretty much gone. The old traditional galleries are just not, there really aren't many high-end craft galleries any longer. And again, I don't pursue it very much, so I don't have great advice, and I don't do it real well myself. I would just say that I've got enough things to do, and I get enough interest these days that, I can, well, I'm not that motivated. I put it that way.
It's actually
I'll make pieces and I sell a few pieces, and the tool business is good. And,
it's an interesting point you make, John. So do you think possibly the internet then has kind of killed the gallery scene in that regard?
Well, yeah, and changed it. I don't know if killed is the word so much, but because a lot of the galleries that I dealt with, they were people my age and older, and so they got tired of it, and a lot of the good galleries that sold high-end craft and wood and stuff, these, they didn't make a lot of money. A lot of them, I think, were probably subsidized by the owners. The husband is an architect or a high-powered lawyer or something like that, and so they did a lot of these good galleries for the love of the work, more than making lots of money. And so as those people got older, nobody's really replaced them. And so I don't know. There's still galleries now. Don't misunderstand me, but they're not. They don't tend to do too much high-end craft. And I think painting galleries are great. I've always enjoyed being associated with painting galleries. And if I were younger, that's what I would do to try to find some places to represent me, is to approach more fine art galleries. If you want to get in a wood gallery, I don't know. In Australia once, I went with my friend, or in New Zealand with my friend Graham Priddle, but it's the same in Australia. And we went to a couple of the wood galleries there, where that's what they are, is they're wood galleries, and there's so much stuff that they displayed the work like by the wood type or something. There was no mention of, or hardly any mention of the people that made the work. You weren't featured. You were on the table with Hue and Pine, or what is it, Cowrie. So all the Cowrie pieces are right here, and it didn't matter who made it. So so I like to be places where they put my name on it, and kind of segregate me from the other stuff, and make it clear whose work it is and stuff. So I think the painting galleries, fine art galleries are probably a little a way to go if you're in that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay, John, good advice. Thank you very much. There's just a question come in there. Helen has popped off there for 1 minute. In regards to the HSS tips for hollowers, can you talk a little bit about the different grades of HSS, M42, etc., and the pros and cons of each?
Good heavens, I'm sorry, Pat, you're gonna have to do that one again.
That's all right, John. Basically, John, the pros and cons of the HSS steel.
HSS, okay. Well, it's pretty simple. The high-speed steel, you raise a little burr when you sharpen it, and the burr is what cuts. You cannot raise a burr on carbide, so the carbide doesn't cut particularly well on particularly on softer woods that are stringy or fuzzy. Carbide's not going to work well. You need high-speed steel.
Okay. And what about the M42, John? What's your thoughts on that? It's in that question.
The kind of high-speed steel really doesn't matter, in my opinion. And, you know, people spend a lot of time arguing about, you know, this kind of this or that or the other. I use M2 steel for my cutters. I've used all of the different grades of cobalt high-speed steels and stuff like that. But the fact is, if the wood's abrasive, it's going to knock that burr off pretty quick. Mm-hmm. If the wood's not abrasive, it's going to last, you know, for X amount of time. And it doesn't matter much which particular high-speed steel it is. Yeah. And, you know, I think even in gouges, people make a lot of claims about gouges, but I've used them all. And sometimes there's a poor gouge that maybe wasn't properly sharp or hardened or something, but it's pretty hard to tell the difference in these gouges. People like to think they can tell the difference, but that's because they just went and spent $125 on a gouge, you know.
Have to justify the expense, John.
Yeah, I think all of the, you know, the European made and the US made gouges are good. I use Thompson gouges personally and sell them. But.
Yeah. John, can your hollowing tools be used with the lathe in reverse to save one's back?
Yes, they can. Yes. Yeah. The only thing is that the screw will then be on the top, and you want to make sure that you clean the screw out well before you put the wrench in to remove it.
Okay.
Yeah, they work.
Good, simple answer, as in yes. So thank you very much. John, we had a little bit of a chat about this the other evening about the lockdown and one thing and another, and you got into the world of IRDs. So you are available for clubs and all this. Are you doing any travel now as well, John, on top of all the IRDs?
Yes, I've recently started traveling again. I've done a couple of weeks in North Carolina and Virginia last month. So it was nice to get out and about. I'm still concerned a little about traveling, but I'll be at AAW here in a little over 2 weeks. And I am available for IRDs for clubs and things. I do 1 or 2 a month. And I've gotten pretty used to it, and it's fun. It's still difficult to having done 35 years of being in front of groups, sometimes very large groups. Talking to the wall is still a little difficult.
Yeah.
But I've gotten the hang of it, and it's fun. When I do the IRDs, I let people talk, and so that's kind of fun. I wear my earbuds so I can hear real well, and I can talk while I'm actually turning. So that's something that's kind of difficult in a live demo.
Yeah. Did you ever think, John, that you would be talking to people?
Give me a call. Yeah, send me an email. Give me a call, and I'd be glad to do one for you. I have several topics I can do, and I'm pretty flexible.
Yeah. John's details are in the chat box, folks. If you want to get in touch for an IRD or any demonstration in the physical sense, I'm sure John he'll travel to some degree maybe in the future. So just to keep that in mind. Yeah, where are we, John? So is there any other question? Helen is back there now. Any other questions pop in there, Helen?
Yes, John Frame has asked, how did you discover or become involved with stubby lathes?
I was in, I went to New Zealand, gosh, I can't, in the, probably the mid 90s, I guess. And there was they had the prototype stubby at this little event that I went to down in the south of the South Island in New Zealand. And it was a welded up lathe. So the next year I was in Australia, and I was in Melbourne where the stubby guys were. So I went over and saw him, and he had the first two production stubbies sitting there. They had not been painted. They didn't have motors. They were just raw, where they were machined. So machined castings. And when I looked at those things, I said, man, that's everything I've ever wanted. If you'll do this and this and this for me, I'll buy these and I'll import them to the U.S. And so we had a good relationship for a pretty long time. We sold 400 or 500 stubby lathes, and things changed. And but still a great lathe. I love it. I love the stubby, and well, I wish, I just want one lathe now. And so since I sell the robust, I keep a robust here now. But stubby's good.
Thank you, John. Any other questions there, Helen?
Yes, Gerald is asking, are you planning on going to Turn On in Chicago in July?
I am. Yeah, thanks for asking. I am currently planning on going to Turn On Chicago. I've paid my money. So again, depends on how COVID is. Let me make something that Pat didn't know about. Let me just say one thing. Some of you know this, some of you don't, but just before COVID lockdowns, just a couple of weeks before that, I had a liver transplant, and my friend Clay Foster had a liver transplant 2 weeks before that, and so I have to. So I try to be really careful when I'm traveling, so that's why I'm cautious. I just want to encourage people to talk to your family and be an organ donor. I met last weekend. I met the son and two small grandchildren of my donor, and it was fantastic. We turned a little bowl out in the shop with the kids, and it was just the coolest thing ever. And so that's all I'll say about it. But do think about it. You don't have to be a young person to donate either.
Oh, that's wonderful, John. No, that's a brilliant thing to bring up there as well. As we get older, we have to be conscious of our health. So for sure, yeah. Okay, Helen, anything else there, Helen?
No questions just now, thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, John, I know that you've been in Ireland and several parts of the world. Is there anywhere in the world, John, that you would have liked to visit to demonstrate that you haven't got to yet? And I use the word yet.
Well, my traveling's probably on the downside, Pat. But most of Asia, I've been to Japan, but I've never been to any of the Asian countries to turn or not turning related. I've never been to China or Korea or any of those places, and I would love to visit some of the Asian countries and turn and do some fun stuff like that. Boy, I don't know. I've been to Central America, and of course Australia a lot, UK a lot, Ireland a few times.
Hopefully you'll get to those other places too, John. Plenty of time yet. John, the question, carbide versus traditional, you've kind of covered that, but is there anything you'd like to add to that question?
No, I think real simple. Carbide, if you're using the flat scraping kind of carbide tools, unless you're doing some kind of resin or plywood and things like that, you're not going to get the results you're going to get with steel, with high-speed steel. and you can't learn to use a bowl gouge by using the little carbide scrapers. You know, the only way to do it is get the gouge and learn to use. You'll never regret it. It's not that difficult. And you know what I hear, Pat, when people say carbide, and Mike Hunter got on me once, and I've always qualified this now because his carbide cutters are different. They're cutting tools and they work very well. But generally, what I hear when people say carbide is I hear somebody saying I don't want to have to sharpen. You know.
Yeah,
that's what's behind the question. And you know, you need to. Sharpening is don't make it a chore. It's just part of the process. It's not, you know, it's just part of it. And it's not difficult. We have so many aids now. Sharpening jigs. Well, there are two things in wood turning. You probably won't ask me this question, or you might, but the two coolest, the best things in wood turning since I've been turning are variable speed motors, which we didn't have when I started, particularly the AC motors that most of us have in our lathes now. And the other thing is sharpening jigs for bowl gouges.
Yeah. Yep. And great bits of kit they are, John. So John, the future of wood turning, do you see it developing anywhere in the future into something different?
Well, fundamentally, I don't think that it's going to be anything particularly different, Pat. I mean, a lathe is a lathe, and they're going to be, you know, innovations that make them nicer. You know, like my robust said, and several lathes have stainless steel beds now, and you know the sweet tilt-aways and all that. But these are just incremental improvements. They don't change the lathe itself. And you know, the style of turning, people are always going to do the kinds of things we do now. Now, will there be new stuff? Sure, there are people now doing, you know, incorporating CNC and some stuff like that does some really cool stuff. So there will be additional things in wood turning that we're going to see. I don't think we're going to see any wholesale shift. People are going to be better, you know, more and more people. You know, we've made hollow turning pretty approachable for most people now if they want to do it. And if they want to make it simpler, they have the little TV systems that Trent made, and laser guides and captured systems. And, you know, there's all sorts of aids that may make the things we do a little easier. But I don't think fundamentally the things we make are going to change that much. There will just be some new ones to go along with what we already do.
Yeah, hopefully these things, John, as you say, making it easier, because somebody's comment about turning in reverse to protect their back, because as we know, the Robust has delayed for a seated turner. As you mentioned, the tilt away and the swing away, different lathes have their own version. So all of these things to make people's life easier, hopefully they will still be safe about the whole process.
Absolutely. But as I said, fundamentally, we're still going to make kind of what we make. And, you know, that's the how are you ever going to take, you know, you can't replace, say, a David Ellsworth sphere. You take this, and I don't care if you made it on his old General lathe from 30 years ago, or you make it on a Robust lathe with a TV monitor and all that. You know, it's still, if you make that fabulous little ash sphere, you know, then we like that.
Yeah. And the result is off a lathe, John. Yeah.
Exactly.
Couple more questions, John. We'll do the draw and then we'll get into looking at your work. So can you just tell us a little bit about the safety that you implement in your workshop, please?
Well, my probably the thing for me, the thing that I do to keep myself safe is my workshop is clean. It's not, there's no clutter anywhere in my workshop. There's no junk on the floor. There's not even shavings on the floor other than, you know, from the piece that I'm working on. So by keeping things tidy and not, you know, no trip hazards, none of that kind of stuff. Safety in general, two things, and I don't think we talk about them enough. We hear all these there's always, when they get into safety, they start talking about all this rule and that rule and the other. But basically, when people have serious accidents, it's high speed and terrible wood, defective wood. Almost all of the accidents that I'm aware of, particularly fatalities, have resulted from those two things: excess speed and crappy wood that's full of cracks and holes and comes apart and hits you in the head and kills you. So,
yeah, some scary.
Avoid those. I wear my face shield for most of my turning. In the hollowing process, I don't necessarily wear the face shield due to where I'm standing and due to the kind of wood that I'm turning. I don't turn wood that's going to come apart. There's nothing I could do to make it come apart. If I was turning a holy piece or something like that, or some piece with inclusions and things, I would wear my face shield for all of that. But I always wear the face shield, roughing out and shaping the outside and stuff. And my speed, I rarely turn. I probably don't ever turn 1,000 RPM anymore. Most 900, 950 RPM is probably about it.
Yeah. Okay, good advice, John. Thank you very much. Helen, any other questions there before we move on?
Yes, I've got an interesting question here from Simon. He says, other than black, most of John's pieces are natural. Is this an aversion or dislike of colour, or is it just leaving this aspect of turning to others and concentrating on your own brand?
That's a good question. I do not dislike color. I love color. I absolutely love color, and I don't mind color on wood. Having said that, a lot of painted stuff these days, and I don't know. Some of it just looks painted, if that makes any sense. But I do. I've always done black pieces. I continue to do black pieces, and I have a little black piece on the table here that I'll show you in a minute. But I don't do very much color. Sometimes on burl pieces, I do a little colored dye to emphasize it. It's not usually an in-your-face color kind of dye, but something to enhance the burl. But I don't mind it, and I do occasionally. I've done a fair amount of colored pieces over the years in various ways. So I do like color. I just don't do lots of it.
Okay, Helen.
That's great. Glenn's asking, do you use a laser on your hollowing tools?
I don't normally use a laser, but there's certainly nothing wrong with it. I don't use the captured system, and so the laser on handheld is probably not all that great. But it's a good way. I don't tend to do large pieces these days, or not very often. If I do a really large piece, say 18 or 20 inches, those can be difficult to measure with calipers and that sort of thing. And the bent wires and all those kind of things are kind of floppy, and so the laser is actually a good way to measure a large piece. So I once in a rare while I use Lyle Jamieson's captured system, with my hook tools and stuff, and then I'll use a laser for being able to measure down in the bottom of the piece. But use what you like. The lasers, captured systems, all that stuff is perfectly fine. I have no objection to any of that. What you're doing inside the piece, what I teach you in a class about how to hollow turn, you still have to do the same logical step-by-step process in hollowing, whether you're using lasers or TVs or captured systems or whatever. What you're doing inside the piece is still the same. And so things that aid you, there's nothing wrong with that. I find, for me, I'm pretty quick at it, and so things like that slow me down a little bit. But there's nothing wrong with it. Use them.
Okay, thank you, John. Any other questions, Helen?
That's great. Not a question, but Gerald has said, I like to quote John to my classes I teach. Life is too short to turn crappy wood. And that's what he tells his students.
Yeah, except the word. I bet he doesn't use the word crappy either. That's not exact. That's not an exact quote.
I think
Yes.
we get the idea of it anyway.
And seriously, and what do we mean? You know, I talked about that in regards to safety. Thanks for bringing it up. But, you know, usually how much time, I wonder, have the guys sitting here and girls sitting here talking to us today, Pat, have wonder how many hours have been wasted screwing around with trying to fix a piece of wood.
Yeah.
Some wood that they should have never picked up, put on the lathe in the first place.
Yeah, designer fire.
All the hours you guys and girls have wasted, and you know who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
All of us to some degree, but you know, just get another one. It's just a piece of wood, and you know.
Yeah, I think, John, and we've discussed it here before, people put their heart and soul into a piece of wood before it ever gets on the lathe, and then they're so disappointed with even a little catch. And as you're saying,
Yeah.
they discovered a piece of wood is a crappy piece of wood. They just can't let it go. They don't want to give up on it.
Well, look, think about it. I'm gonna go ahead and hold a piece here. Here's a piece I'm working on right now. How about you've got 3 or 4 days in the piece, and you look and you see that you've gone through right here. There's a little black speck, and you go to scrape it away, and you can't because it's actually a little hole. Oh, well, you can be you just have to go on. That's all you can do. So it makes a nice birdhouse.
John Jordan birdhouse, that would be a nice one for the collection. Okay, John, just a couple of minutes, John, we just run through the draw here. Helen, have you got the email from Chloe as well?
Yep, I've got that, yeah.
Okay, so
all right, here's what's up. Look at that.
Well, we'll save that till last, John, okay? So I'll call out the prize, Helen, and if you call out the winner.
Yep.
And we have great fun, John, with Helen calling out some of the names. So a ticket to Pat Carroll's IRD next Sunday, Helen.
That is Cynthia May.
Congratulations, Cynthia.
Hey.
Meet the Wood Turner archive access for an interview of your choice.
Oh, this is a complicated one. This is Brent. I can't read it.
It's Brent Haggadoran. So apologies, folks, if we get your name wrong.
Sorry.
We will be in touch. So congratulations, Brent. Anyway, a choice of Meet the Wood Turner mug.
Oh, I can pronounce this one. It's Cindy Droster.
Oh, great. I think Cindy broke the last one. So congratulations, Cindy. And huge thanks to Cindy for her ticket to her IRD or recording of your choice.
And that is Richard Brown.
Congratulations, Richard. And Andrew Hall's 2 skill builders. Helen, we have 2 people for that.
We've got Mike Doyle and Patricia Jones.
Congratulations, folks. And for John Jordan's half-inch Halloween tools that John just showed us.
Would anyone believe me if I said Helen Bailey?
Well, I thought it was Pat Carroll, but anyway.
No, it's not. It's another one I can't pronounce very well. It's Chuck Enstrom.
Oh, congratulations. So we will put you in touch with the people who donated. Thank you very much. Thanks to the people who donated to enter the draw. John, huge thanks to you for those wonderful tools. I think after this interview, there's going to be a lot more sales because they really are user friendly. So thank you kindly for sharing this out with us.
We can fix you up.
Really appreciate it. Thank you. Cindy has just mentioned that her next IRD is on July 9th. So her sign-up information is there as well. So thank you, Cindy. Okay, John, do you want to show us those pieces that you have, John, and then we can move into the slideshow, if that's okay? That suits you?
Sure. Yeah, I just brought 3. I brought one that I'm working on here. This is Osage Orange or Bois d'Arc. It's in the sanding stage now. I'm probably I think I'm at 220 now. So I actually posted this on Instagram and it looked and I said what I said was when it starts to look like this, I'm about halfway done. And so there's so much work in the detailing and the going over and over in the refinement of the pieces when they're like that. But I have a, so I mentioned black pieces. I have a little black piece here with a hammered texture, and then just a little, I don't know if I can get it where we can see it, but there's a little texture on that lip there.
Yeah, we can see it in the light there, John.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do
Just
you
a little
use?
simple texture on it. Yeah.
What do you use to blacken the pieces, John?
I use alcohol-based leather dye. If you're in the US, yeah, if you're in the US, it's Feibings, Feibings. You can get it from Candy Leather, or you can get it on the internet now. And I've got a nice big burly maple piece here.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Sugar maple burl, really relatively rare stuff. We get maple burl, but it's usually soft maple burl. It's what we call it here. Red maple, silver maple, or out on the West Coast, the big leaf maple burl. But sugar maple burl is pretty rare. And that was really nice stuff. My friend Chris Ramsey. Some of you know Chris.
Yes, indeed. It must be it must be a great feeling, John, to have created such a unique piece, because it's undoubtedly, when we see a piece like that, we know it's yours or somebody trying to replicate it. Okay.
Was that a question?
No, just a statement. Like it must be really nice to have a signature piece, basically.
Yeah, well, it's pretty. It's pretty cool. People, sometimes people want to talk about copying and all that stuff, but I mean, to me, it's pretty cool.
Very cool.
It's pretty rare when you start talking, plagiarism kind of stuff and all that. It's very rare that that's really an issue, and I think it's pretty cool. If I go to AAW and there's some pieces sitting around there that look like, it looks sort of like mine. Well, I think that's pretty cool. And they're not trying to steal my market or doing something. They're trying to build their skills, and they're learning. And we teach this stuff, and I show people how to do it. I certainly can't expect them not to do it. And I think way back in the early days of AAW, there was a year when everybody was getting all wound up about this stuff, and I don't really see it. But somebody said once in an article in the AAW journal, there were several articles that year, and somebody said, well, it would take you 2 hours to haul out all the Jordan lookalikes from the instant gallery at the symposium. And and what they meant was, when I started, when people started liking the things I was doing and stuff, it's that I got away from the burly things. Either everything in the early days was either burly things like Dave Elder did, lots of holes and things like that, or little natural edge bowls like Rudy Solnick did. That was what was in the gallery. And so I started doing, mostly ingrain pieces that were, that were sort of refined and didn't have holes and bark and all that stuff. And that's what they meant by that. It's not that the pieces look like mine, but that I influenced people that they didn't have to just do barky, burly, holy kind of things. And I thought that was extremely cool that I might have that kind of influence on people.
Definitely, John, for sure. I'm just going to share the screen here then, John, and we will have a look at some of your work. And if you want to just say next after the slides, and I'll just move through.
That's my little shop. That's my stubby lathe there. There's a robust there now. My turning shop or my lathe room is pretty small. It's only a couple 100 square feet, but all it has is the lathe and a couple of cabinets and my tool stuff, and then I have a little carving area where I carve. There's no wood, there's no machinery, just the lathe. Cherry. I make a lot of lidded pieces. I don't know if we have the full piece or not there. This one's kind of tricky if you study it for a minute. Normally these jar shapes are with lids are turned from end grain, but this one is turned side grain. So I got the sapwood on the top, and then the lid is flipped. So I got the sapwood on the bottom. So, you know, some of you probably have to study on that a minute to get that.
Yeah,
I loved it. I love this piece.
yeah, the detail and that is phenomenal, John. That's why I chose. I have all the pictures you sent.
Large piece. That one's a red maple, or as some of you call it, ambrosia maple. The difference in ambrosia maple and red maple is a couple $100, you know. Same wood. This is a large piece. That's probably 18 inches, and this one does have the pith down the center.
Beautiful.
Thank you. The same kind of wood, but turned side grain. And I did a number of these pieces because these stripes were so longitudinal. Is that maybe the right word for it? Directional anyway. That circular textures didn't seem to make much sense, and so I carved in the same direction as the color.
Excellent.
I think that worked pretty well. Yeah. I need to do more of those. Yeah.
It's definitely a case of reading the wood, John, to achieve that kind of effect on a piece.
Well, Pat, if there's anything, you know, anything about my work, that's it. Is my use of the wood and the attention to it, and like I said, I love talking about it. It's not that difficult, and I think people, you know, can pay attention to these things. Anyway.
Wonderful. There's a couple of questions there, Helen, is there?
There is, yes. Just let me scroll back. Tom has asked earlier on, how do you create the hammered texture on the black pieces?
It's done with a reciprocating tool and a round point. It's stippling. Traditional furniture carvers would use maybe for the background, maybe they'd carve some vines or something on a table edge, and the background would be punched with a little round punch and a hammer. Well, it's kind of based in that.
Okay.
That's great.
And by the way, all of these pieces are turned from green wood, start to finish. The only exception would be the lids on the lidded pieces, where the lids are rough turned and returned. So the lids were actually completely round, but that's the only time that's done. All of these pieces are turned from green wood. And that way I get the nice fresh colors like this piece we're looking at. If this thing were left to dry, if you tried to dry that in a chunk, all of that white wood would be gray and brown. You wouldn't have that nice fresh color.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a comment here from Pat Miller. He says, I think it was Bert Marsh that said the Chinese have been stealing my ideas for 5,000 years.
Yes, he did indeed, Pat. How you doing, buddy? I hope to see you in Chattanooga.
We've got a question from Gordon. He's asked, do you sandblast any of your pieces?
I do occasionally, Gordon. I haven't done one in a good long time, but I have done a number of sandblasted pieces over the years. I have multiple sandblast cabinets with different media in them, but I don't use them. I used them more for my motorcycle stuff.
Okay.
But it's not a bad way to do it. But sandblasting is very aggressive. My pieces tend to be a little more subtle than sandblasting would fit with, if that makes any sense. I do use wire brushes sometimes, like brass brushes, to scrub out woods like oak and ash. and it gives the effect of a very fine sandblasting. This one would have been textured with a little carbide feel, I think.
Okay, thank you, John.
Yeah, that's all the questions we've got for now. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Helen.
There's where I'm just refining the carving on the lips. What I do is I leave these little tips or lips or whatever you want to call them kind of alone during all the early shaping. It's real easy for people if they try to emulate one of these. Is that what they want to do is they want to get up there and they want to work on those little tips. And you end up with the little tip going away because you worked on it too much, you know. So just a couple extra strokes with sandpaper or something up there, and you've misshapen it. So I leave that kind of stuff till kind of toward the end. But this is kind of the detailing that goes on over and over and over again at each stage of the sanding and stuff. A little gouge, a little file, a little sandpaper. I don't have a great picture of that piece, but I really like that piece.
That's a stunning piece, John. What wood is that, John?
Oh, probably eight, I don't know, 8 years, 10 years, but it could have been made last week, Pat, you know.
Yeah, what type of timber is it?
I revisit things a lot, so I like to think that I find little things that I've made slightly better, but they're not going to be real visible. So it could have been made almost any time.
Is that walnut, John?
That is walnut. Yeah, that's nice Tennessee walnut.
Absolutely.
Most of the wood I use, I get from around here. Not all of it, but most of it.
Gorgeous, gorgeous.
This is the piece that I showed you that I have on hand here a minute ago. Okay. So that's some of the grinding there. And
yeah, I just thought it was a great picture to show what you have to go through, John.
Yeah, I like to go outside a lot. I'm kind of I'm not quite phobic, but I don't like dust much. You know, I don't like a dusty stuff blowing around in the shop. So when I'm doing this kind of stuff, unless it's freezing cold or pouring rain, I go out in the cold and whatever, and I'll sit outside and do this kind of stuff most of the time, not always, but. I don't know if I showed the tool there, but I use a pneumatic grinder with a non-ferrous metal cutting burr. I don't use the cut saws and those kind of things much. I don't know much about them. I'm happy with what I use. I used to carve them just with gouges. I used to just do the shaping with gouges. The die grinder speeds it along. I love the bottoms of the pieces. I think the bottoms are very, very important. And so I put a lot of time and effort into. I probably at the end of the piece when the bottom is the very last thing that I do. So what we're looking at here is the very last part that I do. It's been textured, everything has been done, and then the very last thing I do is the bottom. And I'll probably spend 2 hours working on the bottom, just putting a little texture and just detailing and shaping, making sure it's just right. And if you notice, though, that's not symmetrical. The sizes of the flutes vary and the sizes of the elements vary, but they all flow and have good shapes. And I don't write the kind of wood, and I've stopped even putting the date on the bottom. I just put my name.
This piece intrigued me, John, and I have to ask, do you bleach any of the pieces?
Yeah, this one is bleached.
Okay, it's gorgeous.
Bleached box elm, a very difficult piece for a number of reasons. The main one was a guy bought a piece from a museum exhibition, which was a big deal. It was a big museum show. and he bought a piece like this. And when he got it at the conclusion of the show, it had a little red speck, which was just a little tiny inclusion, but it was just a red speck somewhere on the piece. And he decided that I had repaired it or something. And I said, no, that's just, well, he was unhappy. So rather than him sending it back to the museum and all this, I just said, I'll make you another one. So every piece of wood I took then, I imagined what kind of defects were in it, So I don't know how much wood I went through trying to find the piece that was absolutely perfect, But anyway, the trouble was the bleach. Guys, those of you that see that and it excites you a little bit, and it is kind of exciting to see something that stark white. It won't last. Even the bleach won't last, and that white is going to become, yellow brown. And so I quit doing box elder for that reason. I don't do any box elder or bleach pieces.
Wonderful piece of work. Any other questions there, Helen? I thought I seen a comment.
Yep, Joaquin has asked, what's your minimum thickness before carving?
Minimum would be 1/4 inch, 5/16 pieces. The larger pieces or the heavier carving, 3/8 of an inch, sometimes as much as half. But yeah, 1/4 inch, 5/16 minimum. That's as thin as I would ever make a piece anyway. I don't care for real thin, 1/8 inch, 3 mil or something. That's too thin for most things. Now I know Pat does some pierce pieces and things that thinness is a part of his process, and that's different. But I generally don't make real thin pieces.
Okay, another comment there, Helen?
Yep, Phil would like to know, why did you stop dating your work?
I just don't. I don't have a great answer for you. My friend Robin Horn kind of talked me into it, and a lot of things are not dated. A lot of artist work and stuff, and what it does for me is great gallery. The best gallery I ever had was in Atlanta, who was a woman who placed my work in museum collections around the world, and she represented you the right way. But a lot of galleries, when you do a show, they wanted to know what's new, and so if it's got a date from last year, they go, "You sent me old work." Well, no, it's not old work. So you get into all that thing, and so that's probably one of the reasons. But I don't have a great answer. I just don't.
Yeah, it's okay, John. Thank you very much.
Laziness. How's that?
Not at all. Okay, Helen.
No, I think that was a great answer. No more questions, thank you.
Thanks, Helen.
No more questions, really.
Just for now.
This is one that I like a lot, and I'm working on a couple more similar pieces right now. Not in burl, but in oak. But I like metal work, and I do a fair amount. That's hammered steel, and it's color. It looks bronzy, but that's colored with a brass brush. It's an old blacksmith trick, but they're just hammered out. There you go. So you can see the planish marks of the hammer on the lid.
There must have been a lot of work, John, for the little the plug on the side of it. I presume that was carved and left there for the handle.
That is, yeah. Those little knobs take a little while, but that kind of stuff really makes a difference. You could just put holes there and insert the handle there, and that's something probably I learned from Michael Hoslett early on. Michael used to put lots of little porcupine quills and little things, but rather than attaching things directly to a piece, he always had little projections that were carved and then attached pieces to those. and it's such a subtle thing and a lot of work, but it really, I think it makes a big difference.
It really is. It's really nice on it.
This is a steel, the wood's poplar, I believe. My friend Mark Gardner and I made the bowl, the wood part. We both worked on it, and I don't remember who turned it, but I textured part of it. Mark textured part of it. We probably both painted on it, but the bottom of it, I probably have 2 pictures with it. The bottom of it is steel, yeah, and I made the bowl, the steel bowl, here in my shop. We made the rest of it at Penland School, but that steel bowl is hammered out and then done on an English wheel. Just hammered out on a stump or a block of wood, you know, an English wheel. So I love doing that stuff. Then we made the rivets, and then a guy named David Clemens did the resist to make the pattern on the steel, and then that was etched.
Couple of questions there, Helen.
Yeah, a lot of hammering there.
It's a wonderful piece, John.
Yep, there's a question referring to this piece on the screen there. Barry's asking, is that plywood? I think he's referring to the rim.
No, it's that's the texture he's seeing. That has a wire brush. That's a wire brush texture. No, it's poplar, tulip poplar. And that's quite large. The steel bowl there, the steel part is 12 inches in diameter. So that's probably 14 inches across.
That's great. And Emmett asked a little bit earlier, the carved pieces, is the carving done when the wood is wet?
Yes. Can you go back to Pat? That's a very good question. I'll give you a tip here.
That one, John?
Oh no, the one with the handle, the one with the steel lid and the handle. Yeah, that one. If the question, if I understand his question, he asked if I do the carving. So the little ear there to hold the handle. If you leave things like that, if you want to put feet or handles or various projections on a piece of wood, if you turn a ring around there and you leave that ring and let the piece dry, and then you carve it away, you will see a ghost image of that ring. There'll be a color change in the wood, particularly in light colored woods, like maple, sycamore, that kind of stuff. So the same thing with tenons on the bottom of your bowls. If you leave those until it's dry, and then you turn or you carve these sections away, you're going to see a ghost image of that wood. And so I always rough carve these pieces as soon as they come off the lathe. You don't have to finish carve it, but you need to get all of that ring carved away.
That's a very
good question.
Good tip. Okay, Helen, another question there?
Yep, there's one from Glenn here. We talked about not putting dates on the bottom of your turnings, but do you put the type of timber, the species of timber on the bottom?
Nope, just my name.
Okay.
That's good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Helen. And
there's nothing wrong with writing the timber and the date and all that stuff. Some people get carried away, I think, with what they put on the bottom, but it's perfectly fine. It's your work. You can do it as you think is appropriate for you. I have no objection to it. Well, this is a little thing that I made and Cynthia Gibson decorated. I walked out of the demonstration room and stuck it in her hand on the way out the door. 6 months later, you can see did that.
Wonderful work by Cynthia. You can almost see her trademark pyrography.
Yeah. This would be from the early 90s. This is typical of my work from then. The less maybe organic and more a little more detailed, a little more formal, like maybe is the word you could use. I made about 7 or 8 of these, and they all ended up in museums. I can't tell which one this is, but one of them is in the Smithsonian. One of them went to the White House, which is now the Clinton Library. But they all ended up in museums, except for one which I have in the house here that belongs to my wife, Vicky. They did really well. That's a fossil ivory in the top, walrus ivory.
I was really spoiled for choice with the photographs you sent, John, and excellent quality photographs of that. But I really just chose those because of the quality of the detail in it that I really wanted people to see up close. The next couple of pictures now are for people to really drool over. As much as they've drooled over your work, we're now going
Well,
to.
don't change it. Don't switch it yet. What?
Okay, sorry.
Just one thing may be helpful to some of these guys that are, if any of you are craft show kind of guys. When I did craft shows, I wanted to be in the very best ones. And here in the States, that's the Philadelphia Craft Show and the Smithsonian Craft Show that are associated with the museums. And what my friend and I, who was my photographer back then, I do my own now, is detail shots. So I always put, if they needed 5 slides, I put in probably 3 details, because it's different than what everybody else has got, 5 turnings or 5 pots or 5 this. And I've got 3 shots of the details, and I think it helped me get in the shows a lot. That's all.
Oh, that's a great
Carry on.
John. Thank you for sharing.
Shear scraper.
Okay.
That's depressing, because I've got to go down and grind some blades. So.
Yeah, so that's a nice collection of tools. This is the next picture I really like, John. This really had me drooling. So.
Oh yeah, that's the van headed to. We the only thing I don't do is the black oxide finish, and that's where these are headed up to the black oxide. It's a pretty good drive. So Vicky takes them up, spends a day doing, I don't know what she does up there. And then they call her and she goes and picks them up and brings them back. But it makes them look nice. And this was a big load. Yeah. Yes. That's too big. She likes to take them in her car. She's got a Tesla. So she likes to put them in the trunk and take the Tesla. But this was too many.
And finally, John.
Oh yeah, Wood Turning Magazine. I've done a lot of articles for Wood Turning Magazine. I haven't done any recently, and I miss my friend Mark Baker terribly. Yes. We were such good friends, and he was such a sweet guy. I'm gonna get teary here thinking about him.
He sadly missed for sure. Well, that's the end of the slideshow, John. So firstly, I just want to say, before people start dropping out at the end of that, a huge thanks to Helen for all her work as usual in the chat box, and of course to everybody that joined us and our newcomers. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. But John, huge thanks to you. Really informative. Nice to get an insight into your career. You've been around forever in wood turning, but yeah, you definitely a legacy you have created with those wonderful pieces and your tools. So thank you very much for everything that you have done for all of us. So.
Well, thanks for having me, Pat. I saw a number of my friends' names go by here at one point or another. So thanks to you guys that I know, and thanks to those of you that I don't know. If you ever come through Nashville, Tennessee, get in touch. People are always welcome. I'll load your car with wood.
There's an
you don't have to buy a tool. You can come visit. But I'll fix you up with tools if you need them.
Oh, yep. And be sure, folks.
If you come to Chattanooga, by the way, if you come to the AEW in Chattanooga or turn on Chicago or SWAT, please come by and say hi. Always glad to talk to people.
Yeah, very good of you, John. So be sure to check out John's website, folks, for any other information that you may want.
And Instagram. Did you get my Instagram up there?
Yes, indeed. Helen has popped that up there a few times. I've seen it once anyway, John. So If
Excellent.
people need any further information or contact details, by all means, just contact us or John. As you can see, John is very
Absolutely.
helpful. He's very helpful.
Glad to hear from you. Glad to try to help.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, folks. If there's
Okay.
any other questions, Helen. So there you go. Lots of people saying thank you, John, coming in there in the chat box. So,
All right.
yeah. Any other questions pop in there, Helen, that I missed?
I'm just scrolling back through. I don't think we've got any more questions. I think it's just lots of lovely praise there. And there seems to be lots of people are going to be in Chattanooga to see you.
Okay. Well, that'll be good.
I'll be
It's coming up soon.
2 weeks, I
Okay.
believe.
Well, we'll see you all somewhere. Thanks, Pat.
John, been a pleasure, and thank you very much for your time today, and of course your time on Friday that you gave us to do the pre-meet as well. And we do always like to point out that the time that our guests put in to send us over their pictures and the information, and giving up their time freely, we do thank them so much. And John,
Glad to do it.
So thank you very much, John. Really appreciate it.
Aye.
We can hang on for a few minutes, folk. If there's a few other questions about any topic, we'll try to cover it. But we can hang on for a few minutes.
I'll hang around.
Thank you, John. Yep. So lots of thanks and praise coming in for you there, John. So, and well deserved. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, Helen has all that information there, folks. As I said, it'll be in. We don't put the chat box into the archive, but if anybody wants it, just drop me an email and I'll send it over to you when it's all edited out. And we'll do that. And of course, thanks to Chloe as well there for organising the draw in the background. We were getting lots of emails about where is Chloe. For our new people, Chloe is my daughter. As we know her as the boss here in Meet the Wood Turner. It's normally myself, Helen, and Chloe. But Chloe is currently she's starting a new job now on top of everything else that she's doing, so she's just crazy busy. So I have to ban her from the website as well. Just I'm actually managing it on my own, and anybody that knows me well will know that's a job in itself. So, well, it's running smoothly at the moment. Thankfully, I haven't broken anything. Okay, so yep. Great interview, very informative. I agree, Len. John is a wealth of information. What John has forgotten more than most of us will know at this point. So, okay, folks, I think that's it. There's no other questions coming in there, Helen, is it? So we can say good night if everybody's okay with that, or good day to you, whatever time it is in your part of the world. Our next guest will be Helen. I'll leave this to you.
I've just put it in the chat box. Scott Grove is going to be our next guest, and that'll be on the 19th of June.
Yeah, so we know Scott is predominantly a woodworker, but he is in the wood turning world as well, and he's another great guy in this industry. So we're looking forward to having a chat with Scott. So that'll be in 2 weeks' time. So yeah, remember to support everybody that you can, folks. John, Cindy, anybody doing IRDs or tools and equipment. It's good to help these people out, and be sure to pay them all a visit in Chattanooga if you get there. And as I mentioned at the start of the meeting, be sure to say hello to Helen, and we want pictures of you with Helen Bailey. So the famous Helen Bailey. Make yourself famous by getting a picture with Helen. So okay, folks, so enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you all very much, and we'll see you all very soon. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.